Well, I was born in Bristol in 1927 and lived with my parents and my grandmother, and we moved to Clevedon. I can't remember what year. My father worked for WD and H.O. Wills. When we moved to Clevedon, I went to a small private school. I was not a very healthy child. I had bronchitis almost every winter. And as a result, I missed a lot of schooling, so that I was always way behind all my friends. And fortunately, I took up riding because I'd seen horses outside the school, and that did me a lot of good. Well, I left that school when I was about 12 and went to Clifton High School in Bristol. Now, I should have been a weekly boarder in Bristol, but due to the war, we were evacuated to a stately home at Wrexham, just outside Bristol, and we had to travel by coach every night from our school. And the lady who owned the stately home would not let the coach go up the drive. So we had a very long walk up the drive every night. So that wasn't a very happy time. I still got my bronchitis in the winter.
The attitude of people in those days was quite extraordinary, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
Thinking about that.
Yes.
So, just, I know we talked about this a little earlier, but what about your father? Do you know whether he had any involvement in the war? First World War, that is?
Well, you seem to have found out more about that than I knew. So I do vaguely remember seeing a picture of him in uniform. So I think he must have had very, very slight involvement, but it would have been the very end of the war, and it wouldn't have been active, because he was not a very healthy person either. He had a lot of trouble with his lungs.
Yes.
And that is why he didn't do anything in the Second World War. He worked for WD and H.O. Wills all his life. And yes. He was a representative, and he would never do anything else.
No. And what about your mother?
Well, my mother, as you've discovered, she was a voluntary nurse during the war.
That was the Second World War, was it?
Second World,
yes,
yes.
Yes.
They were both vaguely interested in amateur dramatics. My father's main interest in life was Masonic. He was very, very keen on the Masonic movement, and he worked his way well up to the top.
Yes.
And on one occasion he went to London when King George VI was in charge, and he went to an enormous inauguration, and he was given some degree, whatever it was called, and that was his main interest in life.
Hmm. So we come back to you. You've been to school. I mean, you were born, as you said, in 1927, so when World War I started, you would have been 12 years old.
Yes.
Do you have recollections of that?
Yes, I do, because being in Clevedon, when I was at home, which was a lot of the time, there would be air raids almost every night, because the aeroplanes were going over Bristol to Avonmouth docks. And the sirens would go off about 6 o'clock in the evening, when the planes were going north, and then they would go again about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night when the planes were coming back. And to begin with, initially we all got out of the house and went across the road and went into this cellar because that was the safe place to go. But after this had happened night after night after night, and we realised that they hadn't the slightest bit of interest in us, it was only Bristol and Avonmouth, then we gave up and we stayed in our beds. And we did not get up for the siren night after night after night.
And so bombs never really dropped on Clevedon?
They dropped one by mistake.
Right.
Which was in a field where there were 2 horses.
Yes.
And one of the horses got a nasty scratch on its nose, but they were not killed, and they were still there the next morning.
Did the bombers follow the Bristol Channel?
Yes.
Because I know that further north on the Dee and Mersey and so on, they tended to follow in. So were you aware of any distractions to try and stop them from doing that?
Well, obviously there were barrage balloons,
Yes.
which I don't think did much good, but they did their best. But yeah. Bristol was badly bombed. And my other grandmother lived in Bristol, and she wouldn't move, and she stayed in the centre of Bristol throughout the war.
And she wasn't hurt?
No.
No, so... and there was no were there evacuations and things like that? It wouldn't have affected you, of course.
No, but there certainly were, yes. And my father he would not have evacuees, so he got a bachelor friend of his, to come and live with us, to fill up the space so that he didn't have to have evacuees. Yes,
because I suppose they would have come from anywhere.
Oh, they would, yes.
But most likely, I suppose, from places like Bristol itself. But, I mean, I don't know whether Bath was affected in the same sort of way.
Not to the same extent, I don't think, no. And of course, we were restricted with our food, with our rations. I mean, people wouldn't believe the small amount of food that we were allowed to buy. The only way in which I was lucky was because my father was in the tobacco trade. He visited a lot of sweet shops. And in the holidays, he would take me with him. And they would say, "Oh, poor little girl, not getting many sweets on the ration," and they would give me extra sweets. So from that point of view, I was lucky.
Yes.
But obviously we were restricted. We couldn't buy clothes and things like that. And we had this blackout all the time. You had to have you daren't show any light at night.
Even in Clevedon, well, I suppose it was everywhere, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was everywhere, yes.
I mean, did you find, during the war you would have been in your teens, with things like rationing, I mean, did you have to do queuing and that sort of stuff at the various shops, or did your mother do all that?
Well, yes, my mother did all that, yes.
So you weren't directly involved. I mean, what were your pastimes during the war? What were the things that would have kept you interested in things?
Well, I still managed to ride a horse whenever I could find one to ride.
Yes.
And they did eventually buy me a pony of my own.
Right.
So that I did spend quite a lot of time riding, which was very good for me, not being very healthy.
No, quite. And what about things like going to the cinema? And did you do that sort of thing?
We did go to the cinema occasionally, yes, and we did go to the Hippodrome in Bristol. I remember once, because the Bristol Hippodrome is an unusual theatre in that it has a sliding dome roof. Yes. And one night they opened it and forgot to shut it, and it rained. Oh. And the audience got a little wet.
And what about the cinema?
Yes, we had a cinema in Clevedon, so we were able to go to our own cinema, and my parents would take me to that.
So what was the average sort of programme if you went to the cinema?
Well, my father would avoid advertisements if there were any.
Quite.
And make sure that he didn't get there until the film was about to start.
So it would just be the main film? Would there be newsreels and things?
Yes, yes, there probably would be newsreels, yes.
Because how would you have kept up with the news, or didn't you?
Well, we had a radio.
Yes.
Yes, we had a radio all the time, and that kept us up with the news, and newspapers, of course. We still got newspapers.
Yes, and did you? Were there other things you might listen to on the radio? I mean, comedy programs, that sort of stuff.
Tommy Handley and Itmar, which came on at, I think it was 8 o'clock, and on special occasions I was allowed to listen to that.
Yes, because you can still get recordings of quite a lot of the Itmar stuff even today. But,
yes, yes. But it doesn't sound so funny now as it did then. I think it's very dated.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? Because I guess we have changed in things like humour and so on, compared to. I mean, during the war, I guess you looked upon the war as being just matter of fact. It was what was happening at the time. Is that right?
Yes, it affected us in that my father's brother was a bank manager in Paris, and he had to get out just before the war started, and he had 3 children, including a baby, and his wife died, and my grandmother had to help them, and they came over to England and lived in Folkestone for a time, and the eldest boy came and lived with us for a time.
Yes.
And that was interesting. It was very nice because I had no brothers and sisters, so it was very nice to have a cousin living with us for a time, and that cheered things up considerably.
Did he tell you anything of what had gone on for him?
No, he wasn't really old enough for that.
No. So I mean, presumably escaping from Paris just about as the Germans were marching in.
No, they moved well in advance of
yes.
of that.
Yes. I wonder why they chose Folkestone, because that's still quite close to the coast.
Well, it was, wasn't it? Yes.
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 Yes. I mean, are there other things that you can remember about the war that you think might be of interest? I mean, anything funny that happened, let's say?
Well, a funny thing happened one night. I think the sirens must have gone, so my father and I were walking around outside, and a German plane, small German plane, landed in some fields about 5 miles away. And apparently the pilot managed to get out, and he walked to the nearest house, which happened to be a police station, and knocked on the door. And policemen came to the door, and there was this German pilot. And what he did with him, nobody's quite sure, but he was somewhat taken aback, I understand.
Yes.
Which we all thought was extremely funny.
Yes. But presumably he was taken prisoner.
Oh, yes, he was.
Yes,
but
does anyone know why he landed?
No, they don't know why his plane crashed or what happened.
No,
well, I think he must have parachuted out of it, obviously.
Mm.
But that was quite an amusing experience to us.
Yes, yes. I mean, that was sort of the funny side. What about the less funny side, or the sadder side of things? Were there things that you can remember that were upsetting at the time?
Didn't really have any relatives who were injured in the war at all.
And what about other people around you? No one was. I mean, you said there were no bombs dropped in your area,
No,
so
no.
that made a difference. but you're not aware of. I mean, I guess that I don't know when the Bristol Blitz would have been. I mean, in Manchester it tends to be in August and December 1940, I think, are some of the worst periods. But I don't know whether that was similar in Bristol or not.
No, I can't remember which years.
So there you are, and war is coming to an end. And suddenly, I guess there must have been a sort of feeling about, and by that time, you, I mean, 1945, you would have been 18 years old, I assume.
Yes.
And war's coming to an end. Were there any sort of indicators of that? Was there any sort of atmosphere that you, or anything like that? Or, you know, what actually happened when VE Day happened?
Yes, I can't remember much about that. I know that there was celebrations and things like that, but I can't remember a great deal about it.
So you weren't involved in that?
By that time, I had left the Bristol school.
Yes.
And I was supposed to be going to school in Switzerland, but obviously
Yes.
you couldn't go to Switzerland at that time. So the school that I was supposed to go to was in Abu Dhabi. So I
Right.
went to school in Abu Dhabi for several months, and then directly we were allowed to go, we went to Switzerland.
Right, so that would have been what, later in 1945 or possibly 1946?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Yes. And so you were, how long were you in Switzerland?
About 18 months.
Yes, yes. Was that a sort of finishing school?
Well, it called itself that, but I wouldn't have called it that. But it was an international school. We had interesting people there. One of the most interesting was Lloyd George's daughter. But of course, we didn't know she was Lloyd George's daughter because she was called Jennifer Stevenson, which was her mother's name. And in those days, her mother wasn't married to Lloyd George.
Oh, right. So, I mean, what sort of things did they teach you there?
Well, I learnt shorthand and typing.
Did you? Yes.
And French. Obviously we had to speak a lot of French.
Yes.
And other people did all kinds of different things, but that was what I did. And of course it proved very useful to me in afterlife because I've been doing it off and on ever since, if not as a paid job, as a voluntary one.
Tell me a little bit about your jobs then, because I mean, was that in, when you said paid, was that as an interpreter or in the course of the work that you were doing?
No. After I left the school in Switzerland, I went to a snooty secretarial college for a short time, and I didn't enjoy that at all.
No.
And I got a job with ICI.
Right.
As a shorthand typist.
Was that in London or in Bristol?
Yes, that was in London.
Yes.
Yes.
Millbank or something like that?
Well, I wasn't in Millbank originally. I was originally with a pool of girls in a typing place. And then I was promoted to Millbank and worked for one of the directors.
And was that your main career, would you say?
Yes, you couldn't call it a career. It was the job I was pushed into because it was not. I wanted to do something with horses because, but of course my father couldn't afford anything like that.
No. So you were literally having to support yourself.
Yes.
I mean, did that continue after you married?
Off and on, yes.
Yes.
Because I had two sons.
Yes.
One of them is currently living in America, and the other one sadly died when he was 28.
Oh dear. That's very upsetting. And I mean, tell me a little bit. I mean, you married. I think you met your husband. Tell us a little bit about him, if you.
I met him through a friend that I was at school with. I was invited to I was invited to a party somewhere or something, and then I was invited to a ball in Cambridge, and I met him again, and we were married in 1952. And he, coincidentally, he also worked for ICI. But that was a pure coincidence.
Yeah, right. Yes.
And he worked for ICI all his life, and that was how we came to. That's how we came to be in this area, because he was transferred up here.
I see. Yes. Alderley Edge or something like that, was it? I'm just trying to think where ICI
I don't think he ever worked in Alderley Edge. He worked in Runcorn and Widnes and places like that.
Because they were all over the place, in the Teesside as well.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, he worked in Liverpool when we first came north, and we lived on the Wirral then.
So that's really what brought you north?
Yes, oh it was his job.
Yes, yes. And you'd like to so much you stayed ever since?
Well, that's right. Yes.
And you were married locally here?
No, we were married in Clevedon.
Oh, right. So you went back to the family home for that.
Yes,
yes, indeed. I sense there may be things that you would like, that you may have not talked about, you might want to add to what's been said. I don't know whether there's anything that jumps out at you, whether you want to look at any notes you might have or anything like that.
I wouldn't say that the family atmosphere was always all it might be, because, as you can imagine, having Grandma living with you all the time, there was a certain amount of friction, and occasionally Grandma and my mother would fall out, and Grandma would take to her bedroom and shut the door. And she would not speak to anybody except me. So I had to take all her meals up to her, and I had to carry messages to and fro until they sorted themselves out and got back to square one again. But,
such are families.
yes, such are families. But that was something I sometimes felt I could have done without.
I mean, that's an interesting thing, because I think it's probably very much at that age as well. I mean, we're talking presumably when you were quite young, and of course there is always or tends to be a better relationship between grandchild and grandparent than the people in between.
Oh, definitely. My grandmother was my best friend, and of course my parents went out a lot and left me with Grandma. And we would have the radio on, whatever we wanted, and we cooked chips, which was not.
Oh dear.
So that was my experience of Grandma, and of course we played cards together.
Right. So this is where you learnt to play bridge.
This is where I learnt to play bridge when I was about 12.
Yes, and have played it ever since.
Yes. Yes.
And quite seriously, by the sound of things. Yes, but of course
it's changed, like everything else. It's changed over the years.
Has it?
Yeah. Yes.
So you were telling me, I think, that during your married life, and perhaps when you got to retirement age, that your husband and you had to do some sort of deal over bridge and other activities.
Yeah, well, that was when he retired, yes.
And he suggested you played golf.
Yes.
Where did that take you? Or did you play more golf than he played bridge, would you say?
Probably, yes, yes. Okay. But it worked. We both became sufficiently efficient at each other's occupation to do it socially, which is what we wanted.
Yes.
Yes, that worked quite well.
Yeah. I mean.
And after I've done voluntary work for all kinds of organisations ever since. I've been secretary of the tennis club, treasurer of the golf club, you name it, I've done it.
What's the thing that's probably kept you busiest the longest, would you say, in voluntary work? Well, I've been doing the lifeboat for 40 years.
But and as I say, I did Meals on Wheels until they threw me out.
Yes. It sounded bad, that, but it was because of your age.
Yeah, because of
wasn't
their
it?
age and not able to drive their vehicles anymore.
Yes.
And as I say, you know, I've you know, say been treasurer and secretary of various organisations.
Why 40 years with the lifeboats?
Well, when we first came to live in this part of the country, I got friendly with a lady, and she said, I work for the lifeboats and I've always worked for them. She said, why don't you come on our committee? So I said, all right. So I joined the committee, and then I was on it for a long, long time. And then when she left this area, I was still doing it.
Yes.
And I've been doing it ever since.
Yes. And there's a shortage of volunteers from what you're saying as well.
Well, that is very true, yes. Yes, but we're managing.
Thinking back to your war years, do you think that was, as far as you are concerned, you personally, that there is any legacy that has affected you as a result of those war years? Is there anything that you think the war might have affected you in some sort of way?
Yes, I think that I am much more careful, perhaps more careful with money, that because everything was so tight during the war, you know, and you was food was so scarce and that sort of thing. I think I'm probably more economic than I would have been otherwise.
And it's obvious you've kept very fit. Do you put that down? And some people say that the rationing during the war and the fact that you couldn't eat all the wrong things meant that there was a bit of a legacy for the future and possibly an influence on longevity of life, if you like. But
I think that my stay in Switzerland was the thing that made the big difference to my life. Because, you know, everybody says that the Swiss mountain air and all that sort of thing is very good for you.
Yes.
And I think that was the turning point in my life.
And do you do a lot of walking and things like that?
Well, we skied, you know, because we were in the snowy part. We skied a lot, and yes, we did walk.
Yes. And did you keep that going after you left Switzerland?
Once or twice, yes.
Yes. We'll just let that go by. It is 12 o'clock as well, so that that's good. Yeah, I'll probably keep that in. You know, it sounds nice. And one question I often ask people out of the blue is not exactly a trick question, but possibly a difficult one has to think about, and that is, if you now were to think back to your own lifetime, what advice would you give to youngsters today for a long and happy life, would you say? And successful life, for that matter. It's quite a tricky question, this one.
It's very difficult.
Yes.
Because a lot depends on your parents and your parents' circumstances. I mean, I had no wish whatsoever to do secretarial work of any sort. My wish was to do something with horses. I was good with animals.
Yes.
But my father couldn't afford to pay for anything like that. So that if you are a teenager and you are looking for a career, it largely must depend on your parents or your ability to get scholarships and get things for free.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think we've probably come to an end, but Philippa, thank you very much for your time and for speaking to WarGen. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.